Ethan Cole had built a life most men would envy. At 38, he was the founder and CEO of a fast-growing tech firm in Austin, Texas. His smart home buzzed with silent efficiency, clean white walls, polished floors, state-of-the-art everything. From the outside, he was the American dream incarnate. Wealthy, handsome, brilliant, and alone. He liked it that way. Each morning, he brewed a single cup of black coffee, worked out in his private gym, and took conference calls with investors around the world. Each evening, he poured himself a glass of Macallan 18 and sat in silence, watching the fire crackle in his designer fireplace. Routine was sacred. Control was everything. No one ever visited unannounced. That's why, on the night of October 12th, when the doorbell rang at precisely 8:47 p.m., Ethan froze. He wasn't expecting a delivery. No meetings. No friends. No neighbors dared interrupt his evenings. He hesitated before walking to the door, a tight knot forming in his chest. Probably a mistake or some late courier. Maybe a lost Uber Eats driver. But something in his gut told him different. He checked the security app on his phone. Strangely, the live video feed from the doorbell cam was black. Glitched. Odd. That never happened. Still gripping the phone, he unlocked the door and opened it. And time collapsed. Standing on the doorstep, beneath the glow of his porch light, was a woman he hadn't seen in a decade. A woman who shouldn't be alive. "Hi, Ethan," she said, her voice soft, familiar. "What took you so long to open the door?" Ethan stared, slack-jawed. The world went soundless. His vision blurred at the edges. His fingers lost grip on the phone, and it clattered to the floor. It was her, Margaret Cole, his mother. Same honey-brown curls, though streaked with gray now. Same sharp cheekbones, same piercing eyes, same slight curl at the corner of her lips when she spoke. She wore the exact pale blue cardigan she had the night he killed her. No, 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 this couldn't be. "Mind if I come in?" she asked, already stepping past him, glancing around the foyer like she'd been there yesterday. Ethan stumbled back as she moved through his home with ease, admiring the layout, touching the back of the couch, noting the open-concept kitchen. "You changed the place." "It's nice," she said. "Cold, but nice. I'd have picked warmer tones." He didn't respond. Couldn't. His mind raced. 10 years. 10 long years since that night in the woods behind the family cabin. The argument. The rage. The screaming. The cold hands around her throat. The lifeless stare. The shallow grave. It had been real. He knew it. He'd buried her. He'd seen the dirt pile himself. Yet here she was, in his house, living, breathing, and worse, smiling. Margaret turned to him, tilting her head. "You look pale. Are you okay, sweetie?" He opened his mouth, but the words tangled in his throat. She walked to the kitchen, opened cabinets without hesitation, pulled out 2 mugs, filled the kettle, set on the stove, as if she knew where everything was, as if she'd always lived here. Ethan leaned against the wall, trembling. This wasn't real. This was some kind of breakdown. Stress. Delusion. Right? He reached for his phone from the floor, his fingers fumbling. He opened the gallery, snapped a picture of her from behind, standing at the stove. Click. He opened the photo. Blurry, like fog smeared the lens. She was nothing but a distortion. He blinked and looked up. She turned around, holding a mug. "Chamomile, just like you used to like it," she said with a wink. Ethan stared at her, lips barely moving. "You can't be here." Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why not?" His breath caught. He barely whispered, "Because I killed you." She took a sip, smiled gently. "That's silly, Ethan. You must be under a lot of pressure. Maybe too much work." She walked toward him, set the mug in his hand. Her fingers were warm. Her touch was real. Ethan Cole had lived with guilt for 10 years. But nothing had prepared him for his dead mother walking back into his life like nothing ever happened. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of his bed, fully clothed, staring at the closed door of his bedroom like it might swing open at any moment. Downstairs, he could still hear faint noises, drawers closing, water running in the guest bathroom. She was still there. His mother, or whoever the hell that woman was. He ran his hands through his hair, muttering to himself. This isn't possible. This isn't possible. 10 years ago, she was dead. He had buried her body with his own hands. He remembered the weight of it, how cold her skin felt through the blanket he wrapped her in. He remembered driving through the backwoods in his old pickup, headlights flickering across the trees, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. He remembered digging until his palms bled. And now she was sleeping in the guest room. At least he thought she was. Ethan stood, moved to the mirror across from the bed, and looked at his own reflection. He barely recognized the man staring back. Pale, eyes sunken. There was fear written all over his face, and guilt, the kind that never faded. He turned away. No, he had to prove he wasn't crazy. Grabbing his phone, he opened the photo from earlier, the one he had taken in the kitchen. Just a blur. No outline. No figure. Just static like interference on an old TV screen. Ethan took a deep breath, crept out of the bedroom, and tiptoed down the stairs. The house was dark, silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. He moved slowly through the hallway toward the guest room. He stood outside the door, hesitating. Then, with the softest touch, he turned the knob and pushed it open. Empty. The bed was perfectly made. Pillows fluffed. The lamp still glowing faintly on a nightstand. There was no sign anyone had been in the room at all. He checked the bathroom. No towel out of place. No steam on the mirror. No toothbrush on the sink. What the hell? He turned around, nearly colliding with her. Margaret stood in the hallway, arms crossed, bathrobe wrapped tight. Looking for something? She asked calmly. Ethan stumbled back. I thought you were asleep. She raised an eyebrow. No, you looked troubled earlier, so I stayed up. You were watching me like you didn't believe I was real. Ethan felt the floor slipping from under him. You're not real. She stepped closer. Touch me again, Ethan. Tell me I'm not real. He backed away. I took a photo of you, he said quickly. And you weren't there? Just blur. Just static. She tilted her head. Let me see it. He hesitated, then opened his phone and pulled up the image. Margaret took the phone and stared at it. I don't know what you're talking about, she said after a beat. I'm clearly right here. She held out the phone. Ethan looked at the screen. The blur was gone. Now the image showed her clearly, back turned, standing at the stove, pouring tea. He blinked. His fingers trembled. No, that wasn't there before. Maybe your phone was glitching, she offered. You know, technology can be tricky. He stared at her, searching for something, anything, that would prove she wasn't real. But her face was soft, familiar, the same as the woman who raised him, the same woman he... Margaret suddenly moved forward and touched his cheek. You look just like your father when you're scared, she said. Ethan recoiled. Don't you dare talk about him. Oh, come now, she said. You were always so sensitive, so reactive, just like that night in the woods. He froze. What? She smiled again. I don't blame you, Ethan. Sometimes the pressure becomes too much. People snap. It happens. You didn't mean to hurt me, did you? Ethan's blood turned to ice. She knew. She remembered. Or she was playing with him. His breath caught in his throat. Who are you? Her expression didn't change. I'm your mother. No, you're not. Then how do I know you used to wet the bed until you were 10? That you chipped your front tooth on the swing set? That you cried the night I sold your dog, Max? Ethan backed into the wall. This was a nightmare. This was worse than jail, worse than the guilt. This was madness. She stepped back and spoke gently. Maybe you're tired. Why don't you get some rest? We'll talk in the morning. Things always seem better after sleep. She turned and walked back toward the guest room. Her footsteps were soft, steady, deliberate. Ethan stood frozen in place. Was he losing his mind? Or was someone playing a very dangerous game? Either way, he had to find out the truth. Because if that woman really was his mother, then who the hell had he buried? The next morning, Ethan Cole sat at the edge of his kitchen table, staring blankly at the untouched plate of scrambled eggs in front of him. Across from him sat the woman who claimed to be Margaret Cole, his dead mother, cheerfully sipping coffee like nothing was wrong. I added vanilla to the eggs, she said brightly, just like you used to like them. Ethan looked up slowly, the taste in his mouth dry as dust. I don't remember ever liking vanilla eggs. She smiled. You did once, when you were 9. I still have the little note you wrote me. Mommy, best eggs in the whole world. Her voice softened. You never say thank you anymore. His jaw clenched. The familiarity, the subtle guilt trips, the same emotional tone, it all matched. That's what terrified him the most. Everything about her was right. And yet, he had buried his mother. That was real. He stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. "I have to go," he said abruptly. "To work?" she asked, rising with him. "Yeah, meeting. Long day. Don't wait up." He grabbed his keys and left without looking back. Ethan didn't go to the office. He drove north, up the highway and into the hills, until the slick city streets of Austin gave way to dusty roads and dense, silent trees. His car rumbled along the old gravel trail that led to the cabin, the family retreat no one used anymore, long since abandoned. It was here, 10 years ago, that he had done the unthinkable. For a brief moment, as Ethan stared down the winding forest trail, a memory pushed its way to the surface, uninvited, unwelcome, and impossible to ignore. He was 16. His mother had driven them to this very cabin after one of their bigger fights. She claimed it was to get away from the noise, but Ethan knew it was to calm both of them down before someone said something they couldn't take back. They sat outside by the fire pit, wrapped in wool blankets with nothing but stars above and crickets in the background. Margaret had handed him a steaming mug of cocoa and said, "You know, Ethan, people think love is about feeling good. But real love is about still showing up when it hurts. Especially then." He didn't answer. She had continued, staring into the flames. "I know I push. I know I say too much. But it's only because I want you to become something no one can take away. And no matter what happens, I'll always be here. I'll never stop loving you." Back then, he didn't believe her. He'd rolled his eyes, drank the cocoa, and gone inside early. But now, standing in the place where that moment lived, all he wanted was to go back. To say something. Anything. Instead, he reached for the shovel. He parked near the old clearing and stepped out into the crisp fall air. The woods were still, just the faint rustle of leaves and the echo of distant birds. He hadn't been back here in years. Not since that night. Ethan grabbed a small shovel from the trunk. He moved through the brush with careful steps, counting them just like he had a decade ago. 30 paces from the fire pit, 20 more past the stone wall. Then the old cedar tree, half dead now, a gnarled monument to his worst memory. He turned right. 10 more steps. He stopped. There, the ground looked untouched. Weeds and moss covered the soft dip in the earth. No one had disturbed it. No signs of digging. No forensic markers. No shifted soil. His chest rose and fell rapidly. His fingers clenched the shovel handle. He dropped to his knees and began to dig. 45 minutes passed. Sweat soaked through his shirt. Dirt smeared his jeans. His hands were blistered. The hole was nearly 3 feet deep now. And then, thud, the shovel hit something soft. Fabric. He knelt lower, dug with his hands, pushed the soil aside, and revealed a blanket, the same one he'd wrapped her in. He peeled it back, trembling, and saw the outline of a human skull, partially exposed. Teeth still intact. Time had done its work, but this was real. He wasn't crazy. His mother was still here. He leaned back, breath ragged. So who the hell was the woman in his house? Suddenly, a distant rustle cut through the silence. Ethan froze. The sound came from just beyond the tree line, sharp, deliberate, like someone stepping on dry leaves. He held his breath. His eyes darted left, right? Nothing but trees. But the stillness had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. He called out, barely above a whisper, "Hello?" No answer. But the hairs on his neck stood up. He backed away from the open grave, scanning the area. That's when he saw it, a shape, half-shadowed behind a tree, too still to be an animal. Watching, and just as quickly it was gone. Ethan stood there for another minute, heart racing, suddenly aware that this wasn't just about the past. Someone was here, watching him dig. Ethan drove back in silence. His thoughts were chaos. Maybe it was a long-lost relative. Maybe it was someone wearing prosthetics or disguises. But how could she know so much? The little stories, the private memories, stuff no one else could have known. Not even Margaret's old friends. Unless this wasn't just impersonation. Maybe this was revenge. When he got back to the house, it was dark. No lights. No scent of food. No clinking dishes. Margaret, he called out cautiously. No answer. He searched the guest room. Empty again. The bathroom. Untouched. He checked the surveillance cameras. Every file from the last 48 hours was missing. Gone. His hand shook. She had covered her tracks. She knew how to move like a ghost. He opened his photo app again. This time, the image from last night, the one that had changed, was back to static. Just a blur. It was like someone was tampering with his entire world. His phone buzzed suddenly. Unknown number. One new message. He opened it. It was a photo of him standing in the woods earlier that day, taken from behind a tree. Underneath, just 3 words. Dig deeper, Ethan. He dropped the phone. Because whoever this woman was, she hadn't just come back. She had been watching him for a long, long time. Ethan barely slept that night. He stayed in his office with every light on, door locked, a loaded pistol tucked in his desk drawer, something he hadn't touched since the early startup days when his anxiety was worse than his debt. Every time the floor creaked, he jumped. Every time the refrigerator kicked on, his hand twitched toward the drawer. That photo, that damn photo. Someone had been out there, watching him at the grave, standing behind a tree, taking pictures, and they'd sent it straight to his phone like it was a game. Dig deeper, Ethan. He couldn't get the message out of his head. By morning, his mind was racing in every direction. One conclusion kept rising above the noise. This wasn't over. Whoever this was, she wasn't done. And neither was he. That afternoon, Ethan walked into the downtown Austin Police Department. He hadn't been there since they closed the missing persons case on his mother nearly 10 years ago. The front desk clerk barely looked up. Can I help you? I need to speak to a detective. About a cold case. Which one? He paused. Margaret Cole. My mother. The woman typed something into her computer, then picked up the phone. A minute later, she pointed him down the hallway. Detective Karen Maddox. Room 203. He hadn't seen Maddox in almost a decade. She was older now, gray at the temples, sharper eyes than he remembered. But when he walked in, she looked up at him like she'd been waiting years for this moment. Well, she said, I didn't expect to see you again. I need your help, Ethan said, his voice dry. That's a change. He sat down. Someone is pretending to be my mother. She showed up at my house. She knows everything. Personal details. Memories. She walks around like she belongs there. And yesterday, someone sent me a photo of me in the woods at the old cabin. Maddox leaned back in her chair. You went back there? Yes. To the grave. He froze. She saw it. I always knew there was one. Ethan cleared his throat. I just need to know if anyone's been asking questions. If there's anything you can tell me. Maddox stared at him for a long time. Then she reached into her drawer and pulled out a manila folder. She slid it across the table. Someone came to me 3 weeks ago. A woman. Claimed to be Margaret Cole's niece. Said she had a theory. Ethan's heart dropped. Tessa Wynn, he asked quietly. Maddox didn't answer. Just watched his reaction. She said she believed Margaret had been murdered by someone close to her. That she'd been gathering evidence. Disguises. Surveillance footage. Voice recordings. Ethan leaned forward, hands clenched. She's the one, he whispered. Maddox tilted her head. You look scared, Ethan. Like a man being hunted. I don't know what she wants. She wants the truth, Maddox said. Don't you? Ethan stood abruptly. I'm not here to confess. I'm here because I'm being threatened. Maddox leaned in. If you didn't do anything wrong, why are you so scared of her? He had no answer. His silence was enough. He turned and walked out without another word. That night, Ethan set traps. Hidden cameras. Motion sensors. His security system updated. Nothing was getting in or out without him knowing. He sat by the fireplace, glass of whiskey in hand, just like every night before. But this time he didn't close his eyes. He didn't breathe easy. He waited. At exactly 10:12 p.m., the motion detector beeped. Someone was in the hallway. He grabbed his phone, live feed on. The hallway looked empty. Another beep, this time at the back door. He rushed there, nothing. He turned around and froze. Margaret stood at the top of the stairs. You look tired, Ethan, she said. His mouth went dry. Where have you been? In the attic, she said simply. I don't have an attic. She smiled. You'd be surprised what your house has when you stop pretending you're in control. He started backing up. You're not my mother. No, she admitted, descending slowly. I'm what's left of her. The voice you try to bury. The face you can't forget. The truth that won't stay dead. Why are you doing this? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stopped 3 steps from the bottom and whispered, because justice doesn't rot in a shallow grave, Ethan. He lunged toward her, but she vanished into darkness, like a dream interrupted. The cameras blinked. Static flooded the feed. The entire system rebooted itself without warning. Ethan stood alone in the silence, panting, shaking, heart thundering in his chest. Then he heard it, from the ceiling above. Footsteps, coming from the attic. The attic he'd never opened. The attic he never knew existed. Ethan stared up at the ceiling like it might collapse on him at any second. The footsteps, slow, deliberate, unmistakably human, creaked overhead. He had never accessed the attic. When he bought the house 8 years ago, it came with vaulted ceilings and a sleek modern design. The listing never mentioned an upper crawl space. He assumed it didn't exist. Or if it did, it wasn't accessible. But the sounds were real. His heart pounded in his chest as he moved quietly through the hallway. The sound of shuffling above followed him, like whoever or whatever was up there could track his movements. He retrieved the collapsible ladder from the garage and positioned it in the hallway where the ceiling panel met a faint, dusty square, a trapdoor he had never noticed before. He climbed. With trembling hands, he pushed upward. The old wooden panel gave way with a groan, and the musty scent of insulation and old wood drifted down. Ethan pulled himself up into the attic. What he found was not just insulation and forgotten rafters. There was a room, hidden behind a false wall, its narrow door barely visible in the shadows. He crawled forward and opened it. Inside was a fully outfitted surveillance setup. A monitor showed live feeds from every corner of his house, including his bedroom, office, kitchen. A high-powered laptop sat beside a stack of hard drives. Notes, photographs, and schematics of his house were pinned to a corkboard. In the corner, a neatly folded wig sat on a mannequin head. Ethan stared at it, stunned. It was Margaret's hair, the same honey-brown curls, the same part on the left side, a perfect replica. Next to the wig was a prosthetic mask, latex incredibly detailed. The nose, the lines, even a tiny scar above the left eyebrow, identical to his mother. On the desk was a photo frame. He picked it up and felt his stomach churn. It was a picture of Margaret, decades ago, holding a young girl. On the back, a handwritten note. To Tessa, love Aunt Maggie. You're my sunshine. Ethan whispered the name out loud. Tessa. His mind reeled. She wasn't his mother. She was his cousin, someone he hadn't seen in years, someone who had vanished from family gatherings after his mother's death. And now she was here, in his house, walking around like a ghost. But she wasn't a ghost. She was a hunter. Ethan gathered the photographs and ripped the hard drives from their cords, stuffing everything into a duffel bag. He climbed down and locked the attic behind him. If she wanted a game, fine. But now he knew who she was. And that changed everything. He drove straight back to the police station. Detective Maddox was just stepping out of her office when she saw him. Back already? She's not my mother, Ethan said, dropping the bag at her feet. What's this? Proof. Surveillance gear. Photos. A mask. A wig. Everything she used. It's Tessa Wynn, Margaret's niece. She's been living in my house, disguised as my mother. Maddox knelt and examined the contents. Her expression didn't change. I know, she said. Ethan froze. What do you mean you know? She came to me weeks ago, said she had a plan, said she could make you talk. Maddox folded her arms. At first, I thought she was crazy. Another grieving relative playing detective. But then I saw the look in her eyes. It wasn't vengeance. It was purpose. And for the first time in years, I realized how helpless I'd felt when we closed your mother's case without a body. Without justice. She paused. I made peace with a lot of unsolved cases in my career, Ethan. But not that one. Your mother deserved better. And I knew, deep down, I'd only get the truth if someone like Tessa broke the rules I couldn't. His mouth went dry. You helped her. I didn't help, Maddox said, standing. I watched. I wanted the truth. The full truth. Ethan stepped back. This is entrapment. Illegal surveillance. Harassment. Maddox stared at him coldly. So file a complaint. But before you do that, maybe answer this. She pulled out a voice recorder and pressed play. Ethan's voice echoed in the room. I killed you. I choked you. I buried you in the woods behind the cabin. He turned pale. You bugged my house. No, she said. Tessa did. I just listened. Ethan sank into the nearest chair. What do you want from me? I want you to tell the truth, Ethan. Right here. Right now. No mask. No lies. He was quiet for a long time. Then, she said she was going to destroy my company. My reputation. She said she'd tell everyone what I was. What I did as a kid. She made me feel small. She always did. I snapped. And then, I put my hands around her throat, he whispered. I didn't stop. Not until she stopped moving. And you buried her? He nodded. Maddox turned off the recorder. Thank you, she said. Then she turned toward the hallway and raised her voice. You can come in now. Ethan looked up, startled. Tessa stepped into the room. But this time, she wore no wig. No makeup. No prosthetics. She was just herself. And yet, the look in her eyes was still Margaret's. Cold. Sharp. Unforgiving. What no one knew, what no one would ever know, was how hard it had been for Tessa to become Margaret. Every night she'd spend in that attic above Ethan's perfect house, she practiced her voice, low, soothing, edged with quiet judgment. She watched old home videos over and over again until she could predict her aunt's every blink and inflection. But the hardest part wasn't mimicking her aunt's voice or posture. It was erasing herself. There were nights she forgot what her own voice sounded like. Nights she whispered her name, Tessa, just to remember it still belonged to her. Sometimes she'd stare into the mirror, wig on, mask in place, and whisper, I am Margaret. I am the one he buried. I am the woman he fears. Other times she broke down, clutching the photo of her as a girl on Margaret's lap, whispering, I'm sorry, Aunt Maggie. I didn't want to do this. But someone had to. Becoming Margaret wasn't a role. It was a burden. And carrying that burden meant letting go of pieces of herself, one night at a time. She didn't know if she'd ever be the same again. But that was never the point. The point was to make Ethan see, to make him feel what it was like to be haunted by truth, by memory, by the woman he tried to erase. Ethan couldn't move. He just sat there, face pale, eyes fixed on the woman who had haunted his nights for a week, who had slipped into his house, his head, and now his soul. Tessa Wynn no longer wore the mask of Margaret Cole. No wig, no prosthetic smile, no performance. But the fire in her eyes? That was real. And it was the same fire Margaret had in her worst moments. Only this time, it was focused, relentless, and terrifyingly composed. You, Ethan said, his voice low. You manipulated me. Tessa stepped forward, slowly, calmly. You murdered my aunt, she said evenly. I just returned the favor in psychological form. He scoffed bitterly. Do you even hear yourself? You invaded my life. Pretended to be my mother. Gaslit me. She stopped 2 feet from him. You buried a woman in the woods and thought you could bury the truth with her. But you forgot something important. Ethan looked up, defeated and trembling. Tessa's voice dropped. I remembered her. I remembered what she meant to me. And I wasn't going to let you forget her. Detective Maddox stayed silent, watching, letting the moment play out. Tessa walked to the duffel bag and picked up the framed photo Ethan had found earlier, the one of her as a little girl in Margaret's arms. She was the only person in my life who protected me, Tessa whispered. When my father left and my mother was too strung out to care, Aunt Maggie brought me in. She fed me, hugged me, told me I mattered. And you, her voice hardened, you crushed that life like it meant nothing. Ethan swallowed hard, gripping the arms of his chair. Why go through all of this? He asked. Why not just hand over your evidence and let the cops take it from there? Tessa's jaw tightened. Because proof isn't enough when a man like you wears a suit, donates to charity, and hides behind a perfect resume. You had them all fooled. The media, the community, even the police. She looked at Maddox briefly. No offense. None taken, the detective muttered. Tessa turned back to Ethan. But guilt? Guilt corrodes. I wanted you to feel what I felt. The doubt, the fear, the late-night whispers, The endless questions. I wanted you to question your own sanity, just like I questioned reality when Aunt Maggie vanished and no one listened. Ethan's lip curled. You spent 10 years preparing this circus act. That's not justice. That's obsession. She nodded. I know, and I don't care. She stepped closer, leaned in. I became her Ethan. I became the woman you murdered. And it worked. Because now everyone will know what you are. Not just the courts, not just the cops, the world. He glared at her. You're sick. I'm free, she replied. Ethan's voice broke, just slightly. Why are you doing this to me? Tessa folded her arms, her expression unreadable. You want to know what I really wanted? He didn't answer. She stepped closer. I wanted you to wake up one morning and remember how it felt to need someone. To be that scared little boy again, calling out to the woman who never stopped loving you, even when you made her feel like nothing. I didn't mean to, Ethan started, but the words caught his throat. Tessa cut him off. You meant every silence, every dismissal, every time you rolled your eyes or slammed a door. But it's not the anger that killed her, Ethan. It's the indifference. He shook his head, trembling. She always tried to control me. She didn't see me. No, Tessa said quietly. She saw all of you, even the part you try to hide. Ethan turned away. I built a company. I gave people jobs. I try to do good. You did, she said. But you also buried the woman who raised you because you couldn't stand being reminded of who you used to be. Silence hung in the air. Then, softer, Tessa asked, did you ever love her? Even for a second. Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't speak. That's the part one hate most, Tessa said. You don't even know. For the first time, Ethan looked up at her. Not with anger, not with guilt, but with something far more terrifying. Emptiness. Maddox finally moved, stepping forward and removing the handcuffs from her belt. Ethan Cole, you are under arrest for the murder of Margaret Cole, she said. You have the right to remain silent. Ethan didn't fight. He didn't argue. He didn't cry. He just slumped in the chair, eyes hollow, the echo of his own confession still bouncing off the walls. 1 week later, the press exploded. Tech mogul Ethan Cole arrested in cold case murder of his mother. Detective Maddox held a quiet press briefing, confirming the arrest and praising the tenacity of a civilian whistleblower, though she never gave Tessa's name. The district attorney promised full prosecution. And as for Tessa, she didn't return to the house. She didn't go on television. She disappeared, just like Margaret once had, but this time was by choice. The night before the trial began, Tessa awoke from a dream with tears streaming down her cheeks. In the dream, she was 10 again, standing in the kitchen with Aunt Maggie baking cornbread, the scent warm and familiar. But when she turned to speak, Margaret's face melted, revealing Ethan's cold stare underneath. She shot up in bed, gasping. It didn't matter that she'd exposed him. The weight of everything she'd done, the pretending, the lies, the mask, was still inside her. Sometimes it felt like she hadn't taken it off at all. She curled under the blanket and whispered, "It's almost over." But she wasn't sure if she meant the trial or the ache in her chest. Final scene. A small, quiet cemetery in East Texas. Tessa stood alone in front of a new headstone. Margaret Cole, 1948 to 2014. A mother, an aunt, a protector. Finally at peace. Tessa placed a single sunflower at the base. Margaret had always loved sunflowers, so they were brave for always facing the light. She stepped back, took a breath, and whispered, "I found him at Maggie, and I made him see you again." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the old locket Margaret had given her as a girl. Inside, a picture of the two of them on the cabin porch, smiling. Tessa kissed it, then clipped it back around her neck. She looked up at the sky, blue, wide, silent. No voices, no masks, just the sound of wind brushing through the trees. And for the first time in 10 years, Tessa felt like herself again. 6 months later, the courtroom was standing room only. Reporters lined the back wall. Sketch artists scrambled to capture every angle of the man once called Austin's visionary son. And in the middle of it all sat Ethan Cole, hands cuffed, jaw clenched, eyes forward. He hadn't said a word to the press since his arrest. No public statement, no denial, no apology, just silence. But inside the courtroom, the story unfolded. District Attorney Melissa Granger stood tall in her navy blue suit. She pointed directly at Ethan as she addressed the jury. This man murdered his own mother, not in a fit of rage, but in a pattern of control, resentment, and cowardice. He didn't just kill Margaret Cole. He erased her. He buried her, then buried the memory of her. For 10 years, he built a lie, a polished, perfect life. But justice doesn't rot in the ground. Her voice was steady, deliberate. Every word struck like a nail driven deeper into the coffin of Ethan's carefully maintained persona. She presented the recordings, Ethan's confession, the surveillance footage, photos from the gravesite, the prosthetics recovered from the attic. But what shook the courtroom the most was the video. A shaky, hidden recording from Tessa's body cam captured the moment Ethan snapped in the living room. "I killed her. I couldn't take it anymore. She ruined everything. I choked her. I buried her like trash because that's how she made me feel." Gasps filled the room. A reporter dropped a pen. One juror covered her mouth. Ethan stared straight ahead. His lawyer tried to argue mental instability, said Ethan had been under pressure, that his mother had been emotionally abusive, that his breakdown was tragic, not criminal. But no one was buying it. He had buried her, lied, moved on, built a company, donated to children's hospitals. He only cracked when the ghost came knocking. Tessa Wynn took the stand on day 3. She didn't wear makeup, no mask, no show, just the face of a woman who had given everything for one purpose: to make the truth impossible to ignore. She told the jury about Margaret, her strength, her flaws, her fierce love, and then she told them about what Ethan took away. "I didn't do this for revenge," she said. "I did it so that the world would remember who she was, so that Ethan Cole would never again be praised without being known." The courtroom was silent when she stepped down. No one clapped, but no one breathed either. It took the jury 3 hours. Guilty. Second-degree murder. Sentencing recommendation: 25 years without parole. As the judge read the decision, Ethan blinked. No tears. No anger. Just emptiness. The mask had finally cracked, and underneath was a man who realized the ghost had won. The Cole Foundation, once a beacon of philanthropy, was dismantled. Ethan's company folded, investors pulling out almost overnight. Books were written, podcasts launched, documentaries pitched. The son who buried his past. But Tessa stayed quiet. She refused all interviews, ignored every producer who came knocking. Instead, she moved to a small town outside Santa Fe, New Mexico, opened a modest bookstore, taught free writing workshops at the local community center. She never changed her name back. She didn't have to, because in a way, she had become Margaret's voice, louder than it had ever been in life. 2 years into Ethan's prison sentence, he began writing letters to Tessa. At first, they were angry, accusatory. Then they turned reflective, apologetic. By year 4, they became quieter, filled with childhood memories, regrets, dreams he never admitted aloud. He sent 23 letters. Tessa never wrote back, but she kept every single one in a locked box labeled "The Story He Never Got to Finish." The bookstore didn't have a sign outside. It was tucked away in a sleepy New Mexico town between an old laundromat and a flower shop, with its windows always fogged slightly from the scent of brewed tea and dusty novels. Locals called it the quiet place, and they meant it. Inside, behind a mismatched desk stacked with paperbacks, sat Tessa Wynn. Or rather, the woman she had chosen to become. She didn't go by Tessa anymore. She didn't call herself Margaret either. She was just Anna, a name she picked not from family, but from fiction, a character in a book her aunt once loved. It was simple, ordinary, forgettable, and that was what she wanted. Every day, Anna opened the store at 8 a.m., swept the floor, arranged books alphabetically, and made herbal tea. At noon, she held free story writing classes for kids. At 3 o'clock, she closed shop for an hour and walked to the hilltop nearby, where the wind carried silence instead of sirens. In the afternoons, she would return to a small wooden desk behind the counter and write in longhand, memoirs, journal entries, unsent letters. And sometimes she read his. There was one letter Ethan never sent. The 24th. He wrote it in the quiet of his cell just after midnight, long after the guards had done their rounds. It was shorter than the others, more raw, scribbled in uneven lines on a torn piece of legal pad. Tessa, I don't know what I expected. Maybe that you'd forgive me. Maybe that you'd yell. Anything would have been better than your silence. Do you think monsters are born or built? I ask myself that now. I think I was built. Every sharp word. Every time I swallowed pride instead of truth. Every time I wanted to cry and chose anger instead. I hated how much she knew me. I hated how much I still needed her. I killed the person who loved me most. And now, there's no one left who even remembers the boy I used to be. If I could go back, I wouldn't undo what I did. I would undo the person I became. Ethan. He folded the letter carefully, slid it into the small box with the others, and wrote a single word on the envelope. Never. He hid it beneath his cot, knowing no one would find it. And somehow, that made it more honest. The 23 letters. Ethan Cole's handwriting had grown shakier with each one. The first had been venom. The last? Just a single line. Was there ever a version of me that could have loved her right? She had no answer. She didn't keep the letters because she forgave him. She kept them because they were all that was left of a broken man trying, too late, to understand what he had destroyed. One morning in early spring, a stranger came into the shop. He was in his 60s, worn jeans, quiet eyes. He walked slowly, paused at the philosophy section, then approached the counter. You used to be someone else, he said. Anna's smile didn't falter. We all did. He nodded, tapped the spine of a Hemingway novel, and left without buying anything. She never saw him again. The attic was still there, in her memory. The makeup, the latex mask, the wig. All burned now. Every last trace of Margaret's physical identity gone. But the part that stayed wasn't the costume. It was the voice. It was the strength to stand tall, to speak fiercely, to stare a killer in the eyes and not blink. Becoming Margaret hadn't just been a performance. It had been a rebirth. And letting her go wasn't as easy as removing the disguise. One rainy afternoon, Anna opened a new leather journal. On the first page, she wrote a single sentence. I'm not her, but I carry her. She paused, then flipped to the next page, and began to write Margaret's story. Not the version the newspapers had printed, not the version the court had read, but the version only Tessa had known. The woman who rescued her from her mother's screaming. The woman who held her in the dark after night terrors. The woman who always said, the truth doesn't disappear. It waits. They say ghosts are what's left behind when something is unfinished. But some ghosts don't haunt us to scare us. They stay to remind us. In Ethan Cole's prison cell, there were no mirrors. He requested that. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. One night, after a long stretch of silence, Ethan opened his eyes in the darkness and whispered, Margaret. And from the edge of his cot, where the shadow pooled thickest, he swore he saw her. Not Tessa, not a mask. Margaret. She sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, looking at him the way she used to when he came home past curfew. Not angry, not vengeful, just disappointed. He blinked, and she was gone. But that night, for the first time in years, Ethan cried. Not for himself, for her, the woman at the top of the stairs, the voice in the hallway, the face in his dreams. He would die in that cell someday, and she would still be standing there, watching, waiting, remembered.